The federal courtroom fell silent. You could sense the tension in the room. Judge Edward Chen leaned forward in his chair, his eyes intensely focused on Pam Bondi. All the people in the room held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. What happened next was so explosive that it shocked the entire nation and shook the very foundations of Donald Trump's political apparatus. Pam Bondi, Trump's Attorney General nominee, had entered that San Francisco courtroom with confidence. She was 59, having served as a former Florida Attorney General, and had endured myriad interviews, political fights, and congressional hearings. She figured this would be another opportunity to stand up for Trump's policies, something she had done many times previously with flamboyant language, forceful declarations, and emotional appeals. She thought she could assert control over the situation as she had always done. But today, she was not entering a TV studio or a congenial hearing room. She was entering Judge Chen's courtroom, a domain where politics did not exist, and the Constitution was the sole ruler. Judge Edward Chen, a 66-year-old federal judge appointed by President Obama, was a man of his word, known to be composed, focused, and devoted solely to the law. He had founded his career on one unifying principle, that the law is always paramount and politics should never interfere. Judge Chen had halted Trump's Muslim ban, invalidated contentious immigration policies, and resisted government overreach time and again. He did not make passionate speeches. He did not crave political allegiance. What he did care about was truth, evidence, and legal precedents. As the cameras rolled and the country watched, the battle between Judge Chen and Pam Bondi commenced. Bondi began her opening statement with the same vigor she employed at political rallies. She addressed the courtroom as if speaking before a cheering throng rather than a federal judge. "Your Honor," she declared, "this administration has the right to enforce immigration law in the way we see fit. The American people voted for President Trump to make our borders secure, and that's what we're going to do." Judge Chen raised an eyebrow. In his court, you don't cite the outcome of elections as a legal basis. You don't simply tell people what they want to hear. You must demonstrate legal evidence. You must support your assertions with the Constitution and with real law. Then Judge Chen interrupted her calmly. "Miss Bondi," he replied, his voice firm but steady, "I don't want campaign rhetoric. Please point to the specific legal basis that permits the government to act on these policies." There was a moment of silence. Bondi seemed perplexed just momentarily. In politics, loud and forceful tends to work. But in this courtroom, only one thing is important, what the law really provides. "Yeah, Your Honor," Bondi answered, attempting to maintain her confidence. "The president has sweeping executive authority when it comes to immigration. The Constitution grants him the power," she concluded. Judge Chen leaned forward. "The Constitution provides him with what exactly?" he said. "Cite the exact clause and any applicable case law." Bondi was stumped. She had arrived to debate as a politician, not as an attorney. She had brought catchphrases rather than facts. She had used emotion rather than preparation. And it was then, in that instant, that the reality was clear. Pam Bondi wasn't prepared for this. What made this moment so powerful wasn't just Bondi's failure. It was what it represented. Judge Chen wasn't just questioning a witness. He was defending the entire legal system. He was standing up for the idea that no one, not even someone working closely with the president, is above the law. Each time that a Trump friend enters a courtroom anticipating preferential treatment, the integrity and authority of our courts are tested. Judge Chen was there to ensure that test was passed. This was not a typical hearing. It was a showdown between two disparate worlds. The opposing side, the justice system based on facts, reason, and years of dedication. The other, political spectacle, meant to attract publicity and appeal to the public. Bondi believed that she could take victory by being audacious and flamboyant. Judge Chen, however, had a sharp reminder for her and everyone else in the nation that facts prevail, not spectacle, in a courtroom. Pam Bondi built her career on Trump loyalty. She had defended him in his initial impeachment, parroted his baseless 2020 election claims, and now wished to be Attorney General. But loyalty and qualification aren't the same thing. Judge Chen wasn't fooled. He recognized a person who believed she could translate campaign slogans into a federal court, and he demonstrated why she can't. Every word from Judge Chen was like a spotlight, revealing just how unprepared Bondi really was. Her strategy might work at a rally or in a TV debate, but not here. Not in a courtroom where real people's lives are affected by immigration policies. Not when the judge across from her has spent decades standing up for what's right, even when it's not easy. The hearing was no longer merely about immigration law. It had turned into an examination. Was Pam Bondi truly qualified to serve as the Attorney General of the United States? Was she capable of dealing with the grave legal challenges that accompany the enforcement of national policies? Could she stand up not only in politics, but in the courtroom where it counts most? The solution was coming into focus by the second. She wasn't prepared, and Judge Chen wasn't going to let her try to pretend she was. This theatrical courtroom flashpoint wasn't just exposing one individual's vulnerability. It reminded the whole nation of something much greater, that the judicial system has to remain independent, robust, and committed to truth. Regardless of who you are, no matter how imposing you may appear, if you enter a federal court, you'd better be prepared. Because judges such as Edward Chen are paying attention, and they're not playing games. The court went silent. You could have heard the beating of hearts. Legal analysts and watchers in the gallery stared at each other as if in disbelief. This was not how Trump supporters were typically treated, not in television interviews, not at campaign rallies, and certainly not in cordial government sessions. But this was none of those. This was Judge Edward Chen's courtroom, and in his courtroom, political theater did not count. Pam Bondi, Trump's Attorney General nomination, had only just discovered she was no longer in charge. She had entered confidently, but was rapidly losing that confidence. Under pressure, she attempted another tactic. In a dramatic turn of events, she pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her talking points. "Your Honor, if I might," she stated, her voice not as steady as it once was. "We have very strong precedent from past administrations, the Obama administration, the Bush administration. They all relied on executive power to Miss Bondi." Judge Chen cut in curtly. His patience was wearing thin. "Are you seriously attempting to try your case using your phone in my courtroom?" The question hit like thunder. Every lawyer in the gallery froze. People could not believe what they were seeing. A nominee for Attorney General was trying to defend a federal case with notes from her phone instead of proper legal research. It was embarrassing. Bondi's face turned pale. She quickly put the phone away. "No, Your Honor," she said nervously. What were you just?" Chen asked, prodding her. "Please tell me you have actual legal briefs drawn up for this hearing." And that's when the truth was revealed. When Judge Chen pressed her to mention specific legal precedents that she could use to support her argument, she had nothing to say. When he pressed her for mentioning applicable constitutional laws or prior decisions, she provided campaign mantras. When he demanded an actual legal rationale, all she could provide was political spin. Judge Chen's tone turned serious. "Miss Bondi," he stated, his voice sharp but under control, "you are requesting this court to sanction policies that will impact thousands of citizens. You want me to put aside legal protections. And your reason is that the president was elected?" "With respect, Your Honor," Bondi responded, frustration evident. "The American people made it very clear when they voted for Donald Trump. They want borders to be secure. They want law and order. They want stop." Chen's voice sliced like a knife. One word, but it stopped everything. The courtroom came to a halt. Even the bailiff stiffened. Everyone knew this was no longer business as usual. This was something historic. Judge Chen had just cut Bondi off mid-sentence, and in federal court, that almost never occurs. In that instant, the atmosphere in the room shifted entirely. The performance Bondi had rehearsed was disintegrating rapidly. Legal pundits in the back pew were scratching away in their notebooks. This was not merely a difficult hearing. It was an absolute and total demolition. Judge Chen sat back in his chair. He did not remove his gaze from Bondi. There was silence once more. It seemed like a minute, although it probably was no more than a few seconds. Then he spoke, and what he spoke would be replayed millions of times on the internet. "Miss Bondi," he said slowly, every word chosen and cutting. "In 30 years on this bench, I have had lawyers appear before me with weak cases. I've had them defend unpopular causes and take unpopular positions. But I've never, and I mean never, seen someone walk into my courtroom so thoroughly unprepared for elementary legal argument. You could hear a pin drop." Bondi's complexion was pale. This wasn't in her script. This wasn't a debate she could spin. You invoke no law. You provide no precedent. You provide no constitutional analysis, Chen went on. Rather, you provide me with campaign bumper stickers and election returns as if this is a political rally. Lawyers in the room had a good idea what was brewing. Judge Chen was leading up to something momentous, and Pam Bondi was about to receive a judicial dressing down unlike any other. Bondi attempted to regain her footing. "Your Honor, I believe there is some confusion." "No, Miss Bondi," Chen interjected, this time even more forcefully. "There is no misunderstanding. The only question is whether you don't really know how federal courts work, or whether you just decided to disregard those rules because you thought your political ties would suffice." Those words struck like a hammer. Chen wasn't attacking her position, he was attacking her competence as an attorney. In a room full of professionals, it was tantamount to being told you don't belong. What followed would be viral throughout social media, legal sites, and news channels. Judge Chen leaned forward once more, looking at Bondi. His tone was soothing and articulate. "Miss Bondi," he stated, "I recommend that you go back to whatever political campaign employed you because you clearly have no business practicing law in a federal courtroom. This hearing is adjourned." Gasps rang out in the courtroom. Folks couldn't believe what they had just heard. This wasn't merely a defeat. This was absolute professional embarrassment. A federal judge had just informed the president's attorney general nominee that she wasn't even qualified to present arguments in his courtroom. Court reporters typed furiously, knowing these words would be quoted for years. Legal commentators would later say they had never seen anything like it. One veteran journalist leaned over and whispered, "I've seen judges lose their temper. I've seen lawyers get crushed, but I've never seen a judge end someone's legal career with a single sentence." Bondi was stony, her lips slightly parted, unable to get the words out, her neatly styled hair now disheveled, her politician's veneer utterly shattered. She had never been cut off like this in all her years in politics, and never in public. Finally, she attempted one more time. "Your Honor," she stuttered, "I respectfully ask." "Miss Bondi," Judge Chen cut in again. "My decision is final. Please leave my courtroom." What he had just accomplished was the constitutional equivalent of dropping a bomb. It was more than just a ruling, it was a declaration to the whole political universe. In his courtroom, law precedes politics. No politics, no corner cutting, no games. The bailiff edged a bit closer to the bench, keeping a watchful eye on the room. Bondi, still dazed, attempted to salvage some dignity. "Your Honor, maybe we started out on the wrong foot," she stammered. "Maybe we could postpone." Chen wouldn't even let her get out a sentence. "Miss Bondi, let me be crystal clear," he said, having the full authority of the federal bench behind every sentence. "You will not be rescheduling anything in my courtroom. You will not be coming back with more comprehensive anything," Judge Chen returned coldly. "You've demonstrated to this court today that you don't possess the rudimentary legal abilities necessary to come here at all. And just when everyone thought the hearing couldn't get any more intense, Judge Chen went a step further. He turned what had been a personal takedown into something much bigger, a constitutional statement. "This court will not become political theater," he stated, his voice ringing out in the room. The law is not a campaign rally. Constitutional rights are not talking points, and federal court is not a forum where political context can stand in for legal acumen. Every person in the room resented those words. Judge Chen was not merely denying Bondi, he was denying the whole Trump strategy for exercising power, employing politics to attempt to dominate the legal system. The courtroom remained silent as Judge Chen finished his last words. Back row legal reporters were already pounding away on their phones. They understood this was not merely a courtroom drama. It was a moment that would capture headlines and legal commentary for weeks. You could practically see the headlines unfolding in real time. Hashtag Chen destroys Bondi. Judicial smackdown. Bondi meltdown. Pam Bondi, remaining at the defense table, scanned the room as if wishing anyone would intervene and rescue her. But there was no one. This was Judge Chen's courtroom. And in his courtroom, no one is immune to the law, not even someone president selected. The bailiff made one step towards her, not confrontationally, but sternly. It's time to go. And that's when it hit her. Bondi finally realized. Her effort to make a courtroom into a political spectacle hadn't merely failed, it had totally backfired. Her hands trembling, she slowly collected her papers. Her face was flushed with embarrassment and fury, the echo of her heels on the marble. Courtroom floor was the only sound that filled the room as she moved toward the door. The silence hurt. All eyes in the room watched as she moved away. Just as she was about to make it to the door, Judge Chen dropped one last line, the line that would be quoted, replayed, and memed across the internet. Perhaps this will serve as a reminder, he said evenly, that in federal court, the only authority that counts is the Constitution and the law, not Twitter followers or presidential endorsements. The door slammed shut behind her with a sharp, resounding click, a sound that appeared to seal the fate of her credibility in that courtroom. In minutes, the internet went wild. Video footage of the hearing was already being posted on social media. A 30-second segment of Judge Chen instructing, "Return to whatever political campaign hired you," garnered more than 500,000 views within an hour. Hashtags like Chen destroys Bondi and hashtag no business practicing law were trending. Legal experts, news anchors, and everyday citizens all had something to say, and they all seemed to agree. What happened in that courtroom was a total disaster for Pam Bondi. Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe tweeted, "In 40 years of practicing law, I've never seen a federal judge deliver such a complete takedown. Judge Chen just reminded us all why judicial independence matters." Even the American Bar Association tweeted out a thread explaining the law impact of Chen's ruling. They estimated it would be learned about in law schools for decades as a classic case of how not to proceed in court. On legal Twitter, the responses were merciless. One federal prosecutor said, "Watching Pam Bondi debate constitutional law with talking points was like watching a person attempt to conduct surgery using a butter knife. Judge Chen just preserved us all from that malpractice." Conservative news media, meanwhile, were struggling to keep up. Fox News attempted to spin it as an activist judge targeting a Trump nominee. Even their legal analysts couldn't get behind her, though. Judge Andrew Napolitano, Bondi's longtime supporter, appeared on TV and admitted, "I've known Pam for years, but what happened today is simply indefensible. You cannot walk into a federal courtroom and argue the law with campaign slogans." Newsmax attempted to pin the blame on media bias, but the hearing had been live-streamed. No editing, no tricks, just the cold, hard truth on camera. Behind the scenes, Trump's transition team was in a state of panic. Bondi was no ordinary lawyer. She was Trump's #1 candidate for Attorney General. This public breakdown called the decision into serious question. Trump was reportedly furious at how the story blew up, but even his inner circle quietly admitted Bondi's performance had been a disaster. Legal advisors began suggesting that it might be best to quietly move on from her nomination. Even conservative legal groups like the Federalist Society started to distance themselves. They put out a vague statement about the importance of legal preparation. Everyone knew it was aimed at Bondi, and the academic deconstructions followed. One of them was written by a UCLA law professor in the LA Times. This should be required viewing in every law school. When political theater meets legal reality wins. The Yale Law Journal released a complete analysis called When Political Loyalty Meets Constitutional Law, the Bondi-Chen Confrontation. It was the most read legal article of the year. But it wasn't only serious academics jumping into the fray. The internet's meme machine went into overdrive. Bondi's dazed face when Chen instructed her to step down became a meme instantaneously. Captions such as, "When you realize campaign slogans aren't legal arguments," descended on Instagram and Twitter. TikTok creators made edits showing Bondi's confident entrance cut against her devastated exit, set to dramatic music. One viral video was called "How to Destroy Your Career in 15 Minutes" and hit 2 million views in just one day. Reddit's legal communities went wild. The top post in r/law was simple. Judge Chen just ended Pam Bondi's legal career with one sentence. Discuss. If this scene has taught the world anything, it's this: politics doesn't win in federal court. The law does. And when political ambition strolls into a courtroom unarmed, it encounters something much more formidable than talking points. A judge who knows the Constitution and isn't afraid to use it. The storm erupted on the internet. More than 15,000 comments flooded in, mostly lawyers relating their own worst court horror stories. But what had occurred to Pam Bondi was more than about one courtroom debacle. The political fallout reached much wider than four walls. Democratic lawmakers moved fast to capitalize on the moment. They cited Bondi's breakdown as evidence of bad judgment by Trump in selecting his appointees. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pulled no punches. If Pam Bondi can't manage one federal judge requesting simple legal citations, he told reporters, how is she going to deal with being the nation's leading law enforcement official? This is precisely why we need robust confirmation hearings. And it wasn't just Democrats speaking out. Even some Republican senators were quietly concerned. Senator Susan Collins was overheard telling a colleague that the footage from the courtroom raised serious questions that would absolutely come up during Bondi's confirmation hearings. For Judge Edward Chen, this was not only a dramatic day in court, it was a career-defining moment. Legal historians were already drawing parallels to classic moments of judicial courage, such as Judge Sirica during Watergate or Judge Jackson in the Pentagon Papers. Even the typically quiet Federal Judges Association issued a public statement applauding Judge Chen for maintaining the highest standards of judicial independence. That is, they were giving a message. Federal judges would not be intimidated by politics. Judge Chen himself remained silent, as he always did. But sources revealed that he got hundreds of congratulatory emails from judges nationwide. They were thanking him for holding firm, for upholding the law, and for not allowing political spin sully the courtroom. Throughout the legal fraternity, experts and scholars started deconstructing the essence of the Bondi fiasco, and the message was stark. Federal courts will not stand for political theater. The courtroom is no campaign platform, and the impact was instant. Trump supporters who had planned to employ the same combative, talking point-laden approach in subsequent cases immediately stood down. Law firms that were working on Trump-related matters started changing course, emphasizing legal facts more than political spin. Even the American Bar Association intervened. They declared that the Chen-Bondi conflict would be a case study in law training programs nationwide. The topic? The value of being ready and familiar with the law before you ever set foot in a courtroom. When the dust settled, one question remained. Can Pam Bondi still become Attorney General after this? Legal analysts were skeptical. Her confirmation hearings would now not be about her allegiance to Trump, but about whether she can get the job done. And she had already triggered serious doubts about that in her testimony before Judge Chen. Senator Elizabeth Warren didn't hesitate. She declared that she'd be questioning Bondi at the hearings about how someone who had presided over unqualified in court could be qualified to lead the Department of Justice. Conservative organizations began to back off too. Even the Heritage Foundation, which had initially applauded Bondi, issued a revised statement. It emphasized that future nominees need to demonstrate both loyalty and competency, a veiled warning shot. But above all, this entire moment had become a symbol of something greater. Legal scholars and constitutional authorities all concurred. Judge Chen had established a line, a bright, impermeable line. In federal court, the law and not the politics prevails. That is what the Constitution requires. That is what the founders envisioned. This wasn't merely about humiliating one lawyer. It was about upholding the system. The Chen-Bondi exchange revealed to America that nobody, not even an attorney general nominee, is above the law. The words "no business practicing law" went from being a going viral insult. They became a warning to any political leader who believes he or she can take a campaign tactic into a courtroom. And that is what made this moment so great. Judge Chen did not merely issue a ruling. He issued a masterclass in judicial independence. While Pam Bondi arrived prepared for a political performance, she departed having learned the harsh reality. In federal court, the only performance that counts is good lawyering. Her embarrassment will haunt her for the remainder of her career. But the message she assisted in sending, intentionally or otherwise, was clear and unmistakable. This is a country of laws, not catchphrases. If you found this courtroom dismantling to be as surprising as we did, go ahead and give that like button some destruction, and subscribe for additional jaw-dropping instances when law and order refuse to be swayed by political pressure. The replies are going wild. Chime in below. What did you make of the Judge Chen decision? And who's the next political leader to learn the hard way that federal court is not a campaign rally?